Hey guys, and welcome to the 6th episode of the crafting tutorial series. In the last episode we got the dragging and dropping almost working, but we need to actually detect where we land the item and then actually place it in the crafting table. And then in this episode as well, we're also going to set up this clear button to where whenever you press it, it'll just clear everything out of the table. So let's get right into it. Just like the last episode, we're going to be primarily working on the client side today. So go to Starter Player Scripts, Client, Crafting Client. We're going to scroll down to the Input Ended function. Right, so in the last episode, we did manage to detect which item we let go on. So that will help us. It's like if we drag it over here, it'll tell us which slot it actually landed on. So it's row 1, column 3, right? And so that'll be really useful that we already have that set up. But we need to actually add it to the table. So that's what we're going to set up now. So we're going to create a new value down here. I think this was an example I made that I don't think I need that anymore. Yeah. First I just forgot to delete that. So get rid of that if you didn't already. We're going to add crafting client.current table state. Then this. Yeah, right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do, it's going to be a new table, and it's going to be structured like the exact recipe data type. If you remember that from one of the earlier videos. This, where it has essentially 3 rows, and each row has 3 columns. And this is going to be on the client side. It's going to represent what the currently inputted crafting table setup is like. So this is going to be, this part of this system is going to be client side only. And once we actually try and craft the item, once we press the craft button, then we're going to send that information to the server side. So once we press this craft button, we're going to send the information for what's here to the server side to actually try and craft it. We're also going to need to, on the client side, we're going to try and show the player what the current setup is going to craft right here in the result part. So that's going to be done client side. The actual crafting is going to be done server side, so that way exploiters can't make themselves get items that they didn't actually have the materials to craft, right? So we're going to create this current table state. It's going to be a table. We're going to structure it just like in the type definition. And one thing that may help, types.exact recipe data, if we do that, then this will, so we create this new table, right? And we put it inside this current table state value. And we're gonna, so this right here, this notation, this little double colon is gonna cast this table into this type. So it's gonna, we're essentially marking that this table is of this type, right? It's not right now, but we're gonna fix that. Now you can see it should autocomplete, I believe. Not that really matters for this case. But yeah, now it recognizes that it's it is the exact recipe data type. Cool. So we have this table set up. We're going to leave that like that. That's essentially representing an empty table right now. And as we drag and drop items onto the crafting table, we're going to add the names of those items into these strings. So that'll be really simple to do. All we're going to do is, okay, we're going to create a new function. I'm going to do it under these and above the updating display. We're going to call it, so adding item to crafting table display. This is a function we're going to run in order to add an item to the crafting display, like what it shows on the table. And this is what we're going to run whenever we drag and drop an item, right? This is essentially going to be the dropping part of drag and drop, right? Table cell. So we're going to specify the table cell to drop onto, and that is going to be, that's going to be, if you go into crafting table, it's going to be one of these buttons right here. So I might specify X button, just so that's not confusing. If drag item tool is equal to nil, then return n. If, because this drag item tool, if you remember this is going to be set to the tool that's currently being dragged, if there is one, otherwise it'll be nil. And if there isn't a tool currently being dragged, we don't want to try adding something to the table because it's just because we're going to need this information in order to add the tool. Then one thing before I forget to do it, because I forget stuff like this a lot, go over to the on input ended, and then we're going to run the crafting client add to table function, and we're going to specify that table cell. So that's going to be this GUI object. So if you don't remember from the last episode, how we're doing this drag and drop, right? Whenever an item is pressed, we have this item click function. It's set to run whenever one of the items from the inventory side is pressed. It'll set these variables, and it'll change the image of the drag display, the item drag thing, the button that like kind of just follows the mouse. Okay, so then once we do that, then every single frame in on-post simulation, we're going to update the position of that drag frame and set it to to be visible, right? And so then that will make it actually follow the mouse. And then whenever the input ends, whenever you let go of the mouse, it's going to run the other function, the onInputEnded, right here. And it's going to find it's going to look through all of the things that the mouse is currently over, like on top of, and it's going to see if any of them are a button on the table, like any of them are like a cell on the table. And if they are, we're going to run this add to table function with a GUI object. This is the button itself, one of these, right? And then we're going to end the loop, and then we're going to set the variables to empty, right? So now in this add to table function, we're going to return if there isn't a currently being dragged item. And then we're going to see, we want to have a couple like safety checks. We want to make sure you can't drag, because we could just like, add the item, right? We could just, I could show that real quick. We could just do, so like, adding to table, local column equals table cell dot row or dot name. So this table cell is the thing we provided here. It's going to be one of these text buttons inside the table. So the column is going to be the name of that table. So that's going to be C1, C2, C3. Local row is going to be table cell dot parent dot name. And in order for this to work, you need to make sure these names are set up correctly. So it's C1, C2, C3, and make sure they're in the correct order on the actual UI as well. Otherwise, it's going to not appear correctly. So this will give us strings for the table and row, or for the column and the row. And then we can just do crafting client.current table state. So that's the thing we created earlier. And we index with the row, index with the column. So that's going to be the position that we just, we'll let go on, right? We let go of the mouse on it. And we're going to set that equal to drag item tool.name. So that's the name of the tool. So now we're essentially finding which of these slots that we just, drag the item to. And we're going to replace the string in that slot with the name of the item that we just dragged to it, right? And then, I lost it. All right, yeah, and then we need to display the item image. So now that we've set up the actual table, now the table will recognize that there's, an item in that slot now, but it won't actually show it in the display because we haven't actually changed the image. So we're going to do displaying item image. So table cell image image label. So the table cell is going to be this thing. Image label dot image is going to be the image of that cell. Drag item tool. And I'm going to do texture ID. And then I'm going to put a little to-do here. Update result display. This is essentially what we're going to do here. After we add the item to the table, we're going to want to update what it shows on this result frame, but we haven't set that up yet, so I'm just going to add a little to-do message. Anyway, so this right here, without doing any additional checks, this is going to allow us to put duplicate items in, which obviously is a problem, right? So do that. It looks like the positioning of the frame is a little bit weird, but it looks like it does add it to the right place and stuff. But as you can see, I have only 3 of these logs, but it's telling me to add as many as I want, which is obviously problematic. So we need to make sure we actually have enough of the item before it allows it to place the item. I'm also going to see what's going on here with the UI because that doesn't look right. I think it might just be a sizing issue. Oh, well, apparently it just needed to update. I don't know what that was about, but I clicked on it and it fixed itself. I have noticed the UI with this table layout is a little wonky sometimes. And I think I could never figure out why this fixed it when I was testing this, but I'm pretty sure if we do print something, And print should not impact the code, so this shouldn't do anything. Okay, it looks like it's not fixing it right now. Let me print the same thing I printed before. Table cell image label. Yeah, and that, for some reason, that fixes it. And I think it has to do with the fact that the UI is not like refreshing, not like our UI, but like the Roblox UI as a whole. It's not refreshing to match the new properties for some reason. And I don't know why that is. But for some reason, when I print the GUI object, like the image label object, when I print it, it like refreshes it in the display. And I don't know why that is. But if you run into issues with the display, like not updating right and being all weird, for some reason this fixes it. I don't know why, but yeah. It seems like changing this property should update the image right away. I mean, it does this in this case. The issue I was running into on my own, in my own testing, was that it wasn't always updating the image. It would like just not show the image. But before, instead of doing that, it would just like, it was showing the image, but it wasn't scaled right. I don't know. It's really weird. But for some reason that fixes it, and I'm just gonna leave that like that because I don't know why that fixes it, but it does. But anyway, so the issue here is that we can place more items than we have, right? So let's see if we can fix that. Checking if items are available. So in order to check if we have any extra items to be able to place them and add them to the table, we need to check how many items of that type are currently in the table and how many items of that type that we have in our inventory. So we can do local summary equals crafting recipes. Now convert to jumble. This is the function we're going to have to make. So let's go look at that module real quick. So that's going to be modules, information, crafting recipes. Then at the bottom, what this function is going to do, let's create a new function real quick. So utility functions, we're going to add a couple other functions here later on. Crafting recipes convert to jumble. And the reason I'm doing this in the crafting recipes module rather than the crafting client module is so that way we can use this both on the client and the server, because this crafting recipes module is inside replicated storage, which can be accessed both from the client and from the server. So I'm going to have a couple different utility functions in this recipes module just because it allows me to use it on both client and server. So this is going to take the arguments of, or one argument is going to take a layout, which is going to be essentially what our goal here is to take either a movable recipe or an exact recipe and convert it into a jumble recipe. Mostly just because it allows us to say, okay, if we look at this recipe, for example, right? If we want to know how many iron ingots are in this recipe, then we can we can loop through all these slots, all these cells, and we can just count the number of iron ingots and count the number of sticks. But that's essentially the same sort of thing that's going on in the jumble recipe data. So if we can just convert from this type to this type, then that would essentially just count the amount of each item in the recipe. Not accounting for like the positioning of them and whatnot, right? So the argument going into this is going to be either the exact recipe or the movable recipe. So I'm going to types.exact recipe data, or with this little pipe symbol, types.movable recipe data. And then it's going to return a types.jumble recipe data. Okay. I was confused why it was underlining my end, but it's because I haven't returned the type yet. So what we're going to do is going to be relatively simple, looping through and counting items. We're just going to do a for loop through the table, and we're just going to add up the items into a new table, right? So local summary types.jumble recipe data. So this is going to be a summary of all the amount of each item, right? So for row name, which is going to be a string, row, which is going to be types.row of type string, in pairs layout, do. Alright, so this first loop is going to be looping through the rows, right? Because these tables they're tables of tables, right? So each table has 3 rows and each row has 3 columns. So this first loop is going to loop through all those rows. So now it's going to give us the name of the row, so like R1, R2, R3, and then the row object itself, which has the columns in it, right? So then we can do for column name, which is also a string, and then item name, which is a string in pairs for that row. So this one's looping through the layout, this one's looping through the rows inside the layout. And so this is going to be, and the item name is going to be the values this time instead, because each column has just the string that it's set to, right? And so that'll let us check the item name. So if item name equals an empty string, then we can just continue end, and that'll just skip this iteration and move on to the next item, because if there's nothing there, then we don't want to worry about it. If summary item name, then summary item name plus equals 1, and else summary item name equals 1. So what this is doing is it's saying, okay, so we look at this first slide, right? You do first row, first column, where we see iron ingot. So this is not an empty string, therefore we can just ignore this line and move on. Check, okay, if summary item name, and I can specify here, specifically is not equal to nil. That's what I'm implying there. But it does run the same even without this. But we're saying, okay, so if the summary, the new table we just created, has a key for item name, then we will take that number and then add 1 to it, right? But if it doesn't, then we'll set that equal to 1. And so essentially, this value here, this summary item name, is the amount, is the sort of the count of how many items of that name are in this recipe, right? And so if we haven't started counting for a specific item, then we want to add a count right here. But if we have already counted at least 1, then we just want to add 1 to that. So the first one is going to be, okay, so it's, right now it's just an empty table, and then it's going to go through this and say iron ingot. Okay, well, then we add an entry for iron ingot, and we set that to 1. So now we know there's 1 iron ingot and 2 iron ingots. We just add 1 to that, and then add 1 to that, and we have 3. And then, that's empty, so we skip it, and then we add the sticks. So now we have iron ingot, and we have sticks, right? So we have 3 iron ingots, 1 stick, and then, it's empty, we skip it, empty, we skip it. Then we add another one to the stick. So we have 3 iron ingots, 2 sticks, and then it's empty, so we skip it. And so that essentially is going to convert this into this jumble recipe data, right? So now all we need to do is just return it. And that will get rid of this error message down here, because we have the strict mode on, it requires us to return the type that we say we're going to return. So it was just waiting for me to add this line. Anyway, so that now we have that function set up. So this function is going to convert it to a jumble recipe data. So crafting recipes convert to jumble. We're going to input into this. We're going to specify crafting client.current table state. So we're going to be able to take the current table state, so whatever is currently on the table, and we're going to convert that into a jumble. So we're going to count how many of each item is currently in the table, which is exactly what we need, right? So local in table count equals summary drag item tool name or 0. And so what's going on here is we're trying to get the count for this specific item, for the drag item, the item currently being dragged. We want to check how many of those items are currently in the table. So we check our summary table that we just got, and we index it with the name of the item, and we see, okay, if this exists, if there is any of those items in it, then this will give us back a number, and that number will go into this value, and that'll give us the amount of items in the table, right? Amount of that item in the table. If this is nil, which it might be, right? If there's none of those items in the table, then this will be nil. Then in that case, it'll run this or 0, and it'll just put 0 into this value variable instead. So this in table count is going to give us the amount of items, the amount of this specific type of item that are currently in the table. Local in count equals crafting client.count items. This is another function we're going to have to add. So we're going to add this right above this get mouse position. It's going to be another sort of utility function. Crafting client, like a helper function, I guess would maybe be a better name. Count items, item name, string, and we're going to return a number. So this is going to count the amount of items in the inventory, and we're going to give it the name for the item to count, and we're going to return the number of the items, right? So it's going to be relatively simple, but we want to also count both the tools in the backpack and the tools in the character. So we're going to do 2 parts for that. If you have the inventory system, there's definitely a better way to do this. I'm kind of setting this up assuming you don't have the inventory system. because it's not necessarily more performant otherwise. But yeah, just kind of a note there. So count equals 0. We're going to count the amount of items in total, but we're going to start with 0, right? So we're going to do, first we're going to count through all the items in the backpack. And player backpack get children do if tool.class name. So if the item currently looping through is a tool, then and that tool's name matches the item name that we're currently looking at, that we're currently counting, then we're going to count plus equals 1. We're going to add 1 to the count, right? We're going to do the same thing to the character. So counting tools in character equals player.character. If character then, so if the character isn't nil, which would be the case if the player like died or hasn't respawned yet or something, right? Then we're going to do local held tool equals character times the child of class tool. If held tool, if it's not nil, then we're gonna do count plus equals 1. So this is gonna essentially check. The character's only ever really gonna have one tool unless you have like an exploiter that manages to give themselves multiple tools. But even if they do, that's not really gonna. I guess that might lead to bugs. So it might be, if you're worried about exploiters being able to break it, because right now I'm assuming there's only gonna be one tool. And we're just finding that tool by using find first child of class. It's going to find the first tool object in the character that it can find. And if it exists, then we're going to add 1 to count. But if there's a chance that multiple tools might be in the character, then we would want to do for I, tool, same thing as before, right? And but this time in character, get children do if tool.class name and tool.name equals item name, then count plus 1. The reason I didn't do this is because this is going to loop through everything inside the character, like every single item in the character. And the issue with that is there's going to be a lot of things in the character that aren't necessarily going to be the tool. And so we can filter that out, that's perfectly fine. But it's not the most performant because we're going to be looping through like all the body parts and all like the humanoid and everything like that. And so it's going to be looping through a lot of items unnecessarily, when in 99 cases out of 100, you're only going to have one tool in the character. The only time you wouldn't have one tool in the character is if an exploiter manages to like give themselves more than one tool or something like that, right? And if they did, all that would do for them was it would just lower the amount of items that they supposedly have. And so they can make it look like they have less of a certain item than they do. And that's not going to allow them to craft anything with it, right? It's just going to limit them more. So it's not really going to be something an exploiter could take advantage of, I don't think. But anyway, keep bumping that assistant button. I don't like it. So returning final count. We're going to return that count variable we made. So this count variable is going to be the amount of items of that specific name. So let's go back to where we're trying to use that function that we just made. So count items right here. We're going to specify that we want to count the drag item tool.name specifically. So now we have two variables, one for the amount of the specific item in the table and one for the amount of that specific item in the inventory. So now all we got to do is check that they line up, right? So if in table count is greater than or equal to in inventory count, then /spawn crafting client error message. And then I'm gonna say, well, first of all, I gotta type it right. And I'm gonna say, you don't have any more of those. So, and I'm also gonna do return, so it'll stop the code. So essentially, we're saying, okay, if you have more items or the same, if you have the same amount of items or more in the table than you do in your inventory, then we're gonna not try and add this item. We're gonna not add this new item that we're trying to add, and instead, we're gonna give a little error message. And then we're going to stop the code. We're not going to run anything down here, right? So now this will prevent duplicate items. Like it'll prevent you adding more items than you have. So if I use like a pickaxe, right? I have 3 pickaxes, and it'll let me add those 3. Then I try adding another one. It gives me an error message, which is not what it's supposed to do. It's because I did it wrong. Let's see what I did wrong. It's supposed to give me my own custom error system. I don't think I set this error message function up, so let me set that up real quick. So So yeah, so this is going to be the same as with the inventory system if you follow that series. So essentially what I'm trying to do here, this is just a task.spawn. It's going to run a function in a different thread, so it's not going to delay the rest of this code. And that's a function we haven't made yet, so let's go make that function. This is we're going to create an error message function. I'll just put it right here. Error message function crafting client error message. And I believe, so I'm going to specify, we want to specify the message as the argument, right? I believe we have the UI set up for this already. We might not. Okay. Oh no, we do. Okay. So if we close this, we have this error text right here. And that's what we're going to use to display the error message. There's the typo. Okay. So we're going to say if, I think we might need some variables. Let's do, yeah, so we're going to say local error debounce false. That's just so we can't have more than one error appear at the same time, just so it doesn't like break itself if you like spam something. Error position, let's go to error t.position. So this is going to be the starting position, or like the position we want the error to be in, and we're going to use that to actually tween the error into its position, into its goal position, to like add like fancy little visual effects, just to make it look nice. Error time, this is going to be the amount of time that the error is going to display for. So I'm going to do 2 seconds. You can change this to whatever you want it to be. So let's go back down here, error message. We're going to say if error db, then return end, and then we're going to say local error janitor equals janitor.new. And so janitor is the module we required, way up at the top. At like the beginning of the series. I'm going to go over that real quick, what it does. So essentially, it's something you can create new instances of. So it's a type of object. Using this new function, you can create a new janitor. And each janitor has a list of chores that it keeps track of, right? So you can ignore all this set meta table stuff if you're not familiar with that. Each janitor is like an object that has a list of chores. And we can add a chore using this give chore function. And a chore can be anything. It can be a function that we want it to run. It can be an object we want it to destroy, right? It can be a variety of things. So this is a very general word when I say chore. We can also specify additional arguments, but that's for this fancy thing I did up here and some other stuff I did. But that won't be relevant for this video. You just normally specify the chore itself. And okay, so it says if the type of the chore is a function. This is so you can like add additional arguments into it. But basically, we add chores, it'll add the chore, table.insert adds the chore to the list of chores. When we run the clean function, it'll loop through those chores in kind of a weird way using this next syntax. And for each of the chores, it'll see what kind of object it is. And depending on what kind of object it is, it'll do different things when it cleans. And then it'll remove it, I believe, it will remove it, yeah, it removes it from the list of chores. So if it's a Roblox script connection, so like if you did like, user input service.input began connect, that returns a Roblox script connection. It'll disconnect that if it's one of those. If it's a tween, it'll cancel it. If it's a function, it'll run the function. If it's an instance and it's an animation track specifically, then it'll stop. It'll run the stop function to stop the animation. Otherwise, it'll try and run a destroy function if a function for destroy exists. But so like in the case of like a part or something, it'll just destroy that part. So that's what janitor does, and we're going to use that just a little bit for some cleanup work. We're going to do error debounce equals true. So we're going to set this error debounce to true, so that way, once you start doing the error message, then it's not going to let you do a second one until the first one finishes, because we're going to set that back to false at the end, right? Except we're not going to do that directly. We're going to do it a little bit different, but that's essentially what we're going to do, right? We're going to do, instead, we're going to do error janitor give chore function. So we're going to give it a function that we want it to run. And that function is going to be, just going to set error db equals false, and that's all it's going to do. So essentially, we're going to run error janitor clean at the very end of this error message, and it's going to do a bunch of cleanup work, like setting this variable back, right? So we're going to do setting message, we're going to do error text equals message. Right now the error text is going to be invisible, so we want to keep that in mind. We're going to set it all up first before we make it visible though. So we're going to set up the position, error position, and we're going to do plus edim2.from scale. I'm going to do 0, negative 0.5. That's going to take the error frame, error text message right here, and it's going to move it up off the screen, right? And then we're going to do error t.visible equals true, and then error janitor give chore function error t.visible equals false. And so this is essentially setting up the message. So it's going to put the text into the message, the text for the message we want to show, right? The error message we want to show. It's going to move it off the screen so we can move it back onto the screen with an animation. And then it's going to make it visible once it's off the screen. And so that way we can actually see it when it animates down, right? Then we're going to use tween service to create a tween. So we're going to go up here. We already have tween service here, looks like. So then we're going to go over here, tweening out. I'm going to create a new tween, call it tween out, equals ts create to create the new tween. We're going to do error t, so we're going to specify the object that we want to tween, right? To change the properties of, to animate, essentially, right? We're going to do tween information, tween info.new, and we're going to specify the amount of time we want this tween to take. And I'm going to make this tween take a fourth of the error time variable we made. So I'm going to do error time divided by 4. Remember, that's the 2 seconds we specified because we want this error message to be visible for 2 seconds. For a fourth of that 2 seconds, so, you know, for half of a second, we're going to be tweening it out. Then we're going to have it appear for, you know, half of that. So, like, you know, it's going to appear for half of that time, for half the error time. And then it's going to go back away and it's going to tween away for another fourth of the error time, right? So, in the end, it's going to have weighted error time, right? So we're going to do error time divided by 4 as the time to take. Then we're going to do enum.easingStyle. I'm going to do back. And then I'm going to do enum.easingDirection.out. I'm going to specify a new table. And so the enum easing style is just like the style of how it, you know, how it moves, how it animates. The direction kind of changes the style a little bit. You can kind of play around with different values for these and it'll do different things. And then the table here we just created, this last argument is going to be the properties we want to change. So we're going to do position equals error position. And that's the variable we define at the very top of the script. That's going to be the position that we want the error text to be in. So it's just the position it is at the beginning of the game, right? So then what we're going to do is we're going to do tween out. We're going to do colon play. So this is going to run the tween that we just created. So it's going to actually tween it and animate it into the position that we want it to. Tween out, dot completed, colon wait. Then we're going to wait for this tween to complete, right? So the dot completed is an event that runs whenever the tween finishes, right? This will wait for that event to run, and then it'll go to the next line afterwards. Then we want to wait a little extra time to like have the error sit there for a second. So we're going to do task.wait error time divided by 2 this time rather than divided by 4. So it's 2 seconds in total. This is going to be half a second. This is going to be 1 second. So now we have half a second left for tweening it back out. So tweening to be invisible. Local tween away. Equals tween service create. I'm going to create a new tween. I'm going to do error text again. And I'm going to do tween info.new. Error time divided by 4. And then enum. And this time we're going to do enum.easingStyle.sign. And then enum.easingDirection.out. Then the properties. This time, rather than tweening the position, we're just going to tween the transparency to just make the text invisible. So I'm going to do text transparency equals 1, text stroke transparency equals 1 as well. And then we're going to do error janitor chore function error t.text transparency 0 error t.text stroke transparency equals 0. So essentially what we're doing is we're creating this new tween which is going to make the text invisible, both the text and its stroke as well, just to make sure it doesn't if you have the text set up in such a way, with my text, right, I have a stroke around it, I have the white lines around it, the right outline, If you don't have that, if you have your text stroke transparency as 1, then you want to remove these parts. You don't need to make the text stroke transparency invisible. But in my case, I do have a text stroke, so I want to make that invisible as well. This error generator, this function we added to the error generator is just going to reset the transparency once we're done. Once the item's hidden again, and then we can like, then we can run this function again, and it'll still be visible, right? I don't want to be invisible now. So we're going to do clean away. We're going to play that. And then clean away, dot completed, wait, and then cleaning up. We're going to do error janitor, clean. So this is going to run all the chores that we just gave to the janitor throughout, doing all this stuff, right? So that's going to, it's going to set the error debounce to false. It's going to set visible to false. It's going to, it's going to do all this stuff, and it'll clean up everything, right? And that should be the entire error message function, I believe. So now we're already calling the function. If we go right above it, I believe. Yeah, so we're already calling that function. So now let's try that again. So if you remember, we were trying to make so you couldn't add more items than you have. So I have 2 of these iron ingots. I added 2 just barely. If I add a third one, now it gives me that error message. Another thing you may have noticed is it's going under again. It's going under the other UI. I don't want it to do that, so I'm going to change that a little bit. I'm going to select the error text right here in the crafting GUI, select error, go down to Z index. I'm going to make that a big number. 500, sure. And now you can see it says you don't have any more of those, and it actually appears on the top rather than underneath it. You can see if we try and spam it, it'll only do it every 2 seconds. So it won't like spam error messages, and it won't like break itself when you try and do that. Let's make this invisible again. Okay, so we have that set up. We have it so where it adds to the table and it displays that on the table. Then the only thing we need left for this client setup of the table is to be able to remove items. So I'm going to have 2 ways of removing items. I'm going to make so you can click on the item and it'll get rid of it from that slot. And I'm going to make so you can click clear and it'll clear all the items. And those are going to be relatively simple to set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we go to our update inventory display function right here. We're going to say down here, whenever, wait, maybe not here actually, I lied. We're going to go up to the start function, the very top, and we're going to loop through each of the table slots, and we're going to connect to whenever those table slots are pressed. So in order for that to work, you need to make sure your table slots are buttons of some kind, minor text buttons. So we're going to do down here, or I guess above there, connecting table slots. So we're going to do for I, row F in table F, get children, do, and table F is a variable we made for this frame right here. Row F is going to be each of these rows as we loop through them. So we're going to say if row F dot class name is frame, then so we want to filter it to only include these, and we don't want to loop through these, right? Oops, we don't loop through those things. We only want to loop through the frames. We're going to do for I comma, we're going to do for I2 comma column B for like the button, right? In row F get children do if column B. So if the column is a text button, then, and if you have a different type of object other than a text button, you want to specify that class right there instead. But if that is a text button, then in that case we're going to do column B dot mouse button 1 click. Connect to that function, and whenever one of those buttons are pressed, we're going to run a little bit of code, removing item from table. So we're going to do crafting client, current table state. We're going to say specify the row. So that's going to be the name of the row frame, right? So R1 or R2, R3. And then we're going to specify column. So column.name is equal to an empty string. So that will get rid of the item from our current table state table that we made. And it'll make it so it's like empty again. Now we also need to update the image. So column b.image.image or image label.image equals an empty string. That will remove the image label image property to actually make it not show the image anymore. And then I'm gonna add a little to-do message to update result display. So this is also where we would want to update what it shows in the result frame here, but we haven't set that up yet. So now that should have made it to where I can drag an item on, and I can click on it and it'll go away. And to double check all this, what you can do, like if you're having like bugs or anything like that, you can do print crafting client current table state, and so this will print it whenever you remove an item. I'm also going to print it whenever I add an item. So this add a table. I'm going to do print crafting client current table setup or current table state. So now when I add an item, it'll print a table, right? And it'll show in row 1, column 3, it has the iron ingot, right? And everything else is empty. If I click on it, it'll print it again. It'll show that now it's all empty. So I can, this shows, this is what it actually sees under the surface, right? This is the display, but the display is different from what the computer actually sees, right? The display is just for the players. So this is useful to know for debugging this. But anyway, I'm going to remove those prints. I don't need those anymore. I will leave that. I'll leave this to-do message, but not the print. And then now, the next thing we want to do is make so when you press the clear button, then it'll get rid of all the items from the table. So that we're going to do under this connecting buttons. We're going to do clear button. That mouse button one click. Connect function. We're going to do crafting client, or we're not. We're going to do crafting client dot clear crafting table. So we're creating a new function for that. So make sure you just specify the function object, you don't want to run it like I almost did. You don't want to do that. You want to do this like that. And we're going to create this new function right now. So let's do that. Let's see. I'm going to go down under these events. I'm going to do clearing crafting table function crafting client clear crafting table. And we don't need to add any arguments for this function. It's just going to run through all the table slots and delete or get rid of everything. And we're going to say clearing all crafting table information. Do for row name, which is a string. So we're going to loop through all the rows. We're going to do types dot row 3 string in pairs crafting client dot current table state do. So we're going to loop through all the rows in the current table state, and then we're going to do for column name. We're going to loop through all the columns in that row, in each of the rows. Then we're going to say row column name. So what this is going to do is going to take this row object and we're going to find the item in that row. And we're going to set that to be empty. So that's essentially going to clear that item and get rid of it, like we did before with, when you press the item. We're going to do local cell button. We're going to find where what the corresponding actual text button is that maps to this row and column, and we can find that using the row name and the column name. We just do table F, so the table frame right here, and then it's going to be inside of that. We're going to have the row name, and then we're going to do the column name. And this is essentially the same as doing like, if you want to access table F dot R1 dot C1, right? Or table F R1 C1, right? Except we're using the variables. We're going to do row name, column name. And that's going to give us the text button for the specific table cell that we want to clear, right? Cell button, image, label, image equals an empty string to get rid of the image that it displays there, just like we did before. And then updating result, or to do update result display. Just a little note to add that later. So now we should be able to add all our items, do lots of cool stuff, then clear, and don't get rid of everything. And it seems like it works. So on that note, I'm going to end this episode here. I hope you have been enjoying this series, and If you would like access to the completed files for this system to work alongside with, you can gain access to those files with the $299 a month membership. You can also gain access to one-on-one tutoring with higher tier memberships. And without paying, you can gain access to the Discord server, which is linked in the description, to gain, if you ever want to ask questions with development or both related to my tutorials or not related to my tutorials, you're always welcome to join the Discord server and ask questions there, or just interact with the community. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.